If you haven't seen the previous video in this series, follow the link on your screen or click the link in the description or pinned comment below.
Dokusho.
本当に退屈このことは。
Sure, technological advances could lead to massive globalization, eventually eliminating the need to have separate nations. But how the would they eliminate races? What would people use for uncomfortable jokes or Facebook posts?
This is due to a flawed understanding of what race actually denotes. Race is an entirely made-up categorization of human beings, first used to denote differences in language. It was then used to differentiate people based on physical and social attributes. Basically, what I'm saying is, it's something that society created, therefore it's something society can eliminate.
We see that the Major is plugged in, but to where? This is essentially a foreign building to her, so does she drag around a generator with her?
Another one of those superfluous sins that CinemaSins likes to include in order to transition into a scene they actually have a problem with. Stating this building is foreign to her is like saying you shouldn't buy a flash drive because it's foreign to your PC. Also, if you would just let the movie play, you would see the Major is jacked into this building to listen in on the diplomat. The building isn't foreign to her because she's here on a mission and she's obviously hacked into the security system.
聞こえてる。
お前ももうノイズが多いな。
整理中なの。
The English dub of this has her saying, must be a loose wire, and the subtitles say, I'm on my period. I'd like to know how a cybernetic human has her period, or if she's making jokes, or what. I mean, whoever was responsible for the English dubs in this thought that was too f***ed up to say, and this is a movie with naked animated chicks and exploding heads.
I think it says a lot that a so-called comedy channel has a hard time with obvious jokes. In any case, this should let you and others like you know, stop watching dubbed anime. You will completely miss the intent of the original Japanese and what the artists were trying to say, sometimes completely ruining the characterization of certain characters. A lot of you people were completely shocked when you found out that Goku is actually a dumbass, and it's clear you all started watching Dragon Ball in the middle. Yes, Z is the second series.
たまに休暇が介入するのは後々まずいんじゃないのか?
This is a question that should have been asked long before the mission was already underway.
Bato actually answers this question in a way that allows the audience to know there are multiple divisions within the Ministry of Home Affairs and that they don't necessarily work together. Their mission was only to spy, but now they're taking action. This is what prompts the question.
Japanese police officers in Japan have the word police spelled out in English on their uniform and helmet. Globalization, man!
I know, right? Japanese police officers with the word police in English? Well, that's absolutely not something that's a thing in real life, so it's clearly a sin of this film.
You know how we know this guy is bad? He's got a f***ing big-ass aquarium in his office. It's the Lethal Weapon effect.
Cute pop culture reference that isn't a sin of this movie and all, but this guy isn't bad. He's a diplomat that's offering political asylum to a defector. Besides, the Arowana aren't even his for all we know. This is just a meeting place.
外交官免責特権だ。
Large men with guns that literally just fired on the police force, so shouldn't that trump diplomatic immunity?
Yes, but in that scene, you can hear the diplomat scold his men for firing on their own, which of course means the police could also hear that exchange.
したがって我が国は国際法に基づき、彼を保護し連れ帰る権利を有する。
Movie describes international politics so well that it unintentionally inspired 60% of the Star Wars prequels.
Oh boy, this is going to be one of those videos where they're not actually pointing out things that are wrong with the movie and instead trying their hand at sit-down comedy. Problem with that is, I can't find a single person that found that funny.
Actually, I found it funny.
我が国は平和主義の民主国家だ。
あらそう。
The Major dropped in before the police got there, so why didn't she shoot the diplomat then, before a massive amount of extra firepower showed up?
Probably because, like always, you fail to account for things happening at the same time. Seriously, you won't be satisfied until a movie shows a side-by-side view of things happening simultaneously, and I bet somehow you'd still fail to understand what was going on.
Gotta admit, the optical camouflage is rad enough to even take a sin off. But let's assess this for a second.
Yes, let's. Jeremy sends something he likes cliche.
Also, come on, there have to be better ways of assassinating the diplomat than the Major throwing herself off the top of the building, smashing to bits on the ground, and later getting reconstructed. This was the plan they came up with?
No, because that's not what happened.
The opening title sequence shows us the process of the Build a Warrior workshop, which instills us with a sense of wonder and a baffling boner.
Jeremy sends something he obviously likes and says boner in the same sin.
Movie took great pains to show this character fully nude during her rebirth, but later found a comfy pajama for her to sleep in.
It's almost like you're nude when you're being born or something.
34 seconds of staring at this skyline.
Yeah, I can see how you were frustrated with your happiness during this movie's title credits, being that the Major was nude and all, so you couldn't send the length. But taking your X seconds of nonsense sin out on the animation of this film? Well, that's a sin for every second you just mentioned.
Weirdly, this is Aramaki's happy to see you face.
報告情報筋の警告通り
From a certain country? You mean you can't tell anybody here what the country is? Why not just say a source warned us about somebody hacking into the interpreter instead of being coy about this mystery nation?
Probably because nobody cares about this as much as you do. Besides, the Japanese translates to foreign intelligence. Get it? A certain country? Foreign intelligence?
おそらく彼女のゴーストをハッキングして階段を襲撃させるつもりだったんだろう
I know they're now using this interpreter to track the puppet master, but how did they know she was hacked in the first place?
Fam, just say you don't understand this movie and move the f*** on. How did they know she was hacked? What the f*** do you mean, how do they know? You want a goddamn dissertation on how a society that has figured out how to put human minds inside synthetic bodies knows how something gets hacked? Are you f***ing serious?
敵活動の経験のないデカ上がりでおまけに初対持ち電脳化はしてても脳みそは
This supposedly high-speed trip to find the guy who's hacking into the woman's brain is a perfect opportunity to learn all you need to know about Togusa.
There is nothing in this movie that suggests this trip is supposedly high speed. You literally just made that up. And second, this conversation was pretty natural. Togusa is a newer member of the group, and he uses older weapons due to him being more human than the rest of the group. The Major was ordering him to stop using those weapons in preparation for the upcoming mission, so he inquired why she wanted him on the squad in the first place. Hence this conversation.
These assholes get the biggest and luckiest break ever when this tardy dick comes running down the stairs to catch the garbage truck carrying the hacker these detectives just so happen to be looking for.
Quick question. Why is getting lucky a sin? You know, something wrong with this movie. You seem to just be narrating the events on the screen and then counting what you see as a sin. Besides, the way you worded this sin implies they got lucky because the garbage truck was even here, opposed to the tenant being late with his garbage, which is weird because they're tracking the hacks.
Seriously, in the future, we can turn humans into cybernetic soldiers, but the graphics apparently use the hardware from the original Famicom.
Right, let's judge a movie made in the early 90s on its graphics and compare them to a video game system that released in the early 80s, whose graphics were nowhere near the level of this movie. Why? Because we're CinemaSins, damn it.
運転もらうわよ
It's cool she can take over driving duties this way, but she seriously can't just tell this guy where to go and tell him to go faster.
Notice how Jeremy completely fails to account for the earlier conversation he complained about. Remember, he specifically implied giving the audience backstory on Togusa was unnecessary, except this scene shows that Togusa doesn't have the skill and reflexes of the Major. You know, because he's more human. This scene also subverts the idea that they were going supposedly high speed.
後半俺がゴミ運んであんたが電話するってのおめえの共犯になるのはごめんだよ
First off, by knowing that this dude is hacking into some shit and not doing anything about it, you're kind of already an accomplice.
No, all the trash man knows is that this guy is spying on his wife. He has no idea he's being manipulated by the puppet master. They show him receive a phone call and he's bewildered that the police have been tracking them.
運転返すぞ
Damn girl, make up your mind.
Does this not count as making up one's mind? She reached the garbage truck and is about to hop out and start wrecking shit.
Again, why wouldn't you just be camouflaged all the time?
Because at least in this version of Ghost in the Shell, the technology hasn't yet been perfected. Besides, you wouldn't want to be invisible all the time. Haven't you seen the X-Files?
And again, can we even call it camouflage with this kind of fatal flaw? How did this even get to market, Samsung?
Aren't you the same guy that just stated they should always be invisible? If you knew they had this flaw, how the hell does the other sin even count?
This kind of thing shows you how strong she is, but wouldn't this be something you wouldn't want your lethal ninja computer badass to do? Wouldn't that kind of thing alert people to her presence?
Quite a lot wrong with this one. Firstly, this is demonstrating her weight, not her strength. Then again, you would be the dude that thinks someone destroying metal by landing on it is a show of strength. Second, you made this video before the live-action Ghost in the Shell video, and in that one, you specifically complained about the movie showing the Major as super strong. Do you take stupid pills before you watch movies? How did you not put two and two together? They're both literally called Ghost in the Shell. And lastly, you said this as if the Major doesn't have her own agency. She's a cyborg, not a robot. She is fully autonomous, so if she destroys something, it's because she made that call. She's not a ninja, my dude. She's a former soldier. You'd have thought the name Major would tip you off.
Is the optical camouflage also bulletproof? Because if not, I'm calling bullshit on this dude being alive after that bullet barrage.
The Major is shooting the water to deactivate his camo, which is one of the weaknesses of the camo.
Gun Magazine is extremely specific about what number of remaining rounds it's prepared to tell you about.
I know, right? Holes in a magazine that denote the amount of ammunition left? Well, that's absolutely not something that's a thing in real life, so it's clearly a sin of this film.
What's this f***o so happy about?
Sinning this scene. For literally any reason at all.
それで終わりか?
The Major was prepared to fill this guy full of bullet holes in the previous scene, but now it's come to fisticuffs.
As explained earlier, she was trying to deactivate his camo. Now that his weapon is out of ammo and they want to find out what he knows, lethal weapons are no longer required. In other words, she's not an American cop.
I would love for someone to explain the rules of this optical camouflage to me. It's sometimes visible and sometimes not. Occasionally it'll flash color, and other times it's the outline of the person. It even covers the hair when the plot demands it.
Sounds like you just explained it yourself. It's not perfect. Besides, the vast majority of the effects are for the audience. Stop pretending like you've never seen invisible things in movies before. This shit is embarrassing.
Wait a minute, where the hell is this helicopter landing? These people are in a canal surrounded on all sides by a sprawling city. Where the f*** is this goddamn park surrounded by a forest? Or is this movie saying that the helicopter noise is just a transition to the next scene? Because that shit is confusing.
Confusing to who? They literally showed the helicopter landing in a different scene, in a different context, in a location with different characters, and somehow this is still confusing in your mind.
It's a little-known fact that Sonny Crockett continued his post-Miami Vice career with the Japanese police department.
Jeremy makes a pop culture reference that isn't a sin of the...
あなたが同僚に見せようとした写真だ。
Sure, but how did they know he tried to show it to his colleague? Nobody else was in the truck, and the other dude didn't even look at it, and would have no idea which picture he tried to show him.
Obviously, they already questioned the other trash man. Even though he didn't look at the photograph, he's still aware there was one. It's not that hard to use our brains, Jer. Give it a try.
Earlier we saw that the Major is heavy and dense enough to bend a metal roof tile, but here she's buoyant enough to float on water instead of sinking like a rock.
Even if the movie didn't literally explain that she's using gas tanks to float, in the very next scene, I'd love your explanation for why a boat wouldn't be heavy and dense enough to bend a metal roof tile.
First off, why would a cyborg need a day off?
Because the cyborg is still alive? Because that's what cyborg means? She's not an android or a robot. She has a human brain that still needs to decompress after the stresses of a mission. I mean, she's powerful and all, but she's not...
So, is the voice the Major, or is it the ghost? Or is it the puppet master? Or is it some combination of one or two or all of those things? Look, this movie is cool and all, but it's one of the most confusing movies I've ever watched, and I saw Inherent Vice.
If you watched this scene, looked at the reaction of Bato and the Major, and didn't come away with that was the puppet master, you're bad at watching movies and should hang it up.
Literally 3 minutes of beautiful imagery and a haunting chorus, and I'm confused whether to remove Sins for its awesomeness or add one for wasting my time with its awesomeness. It's at times like this you gotta ask, what would a dick do? Even if the airport runway were right behind this camera angle, that's way too f***ing close for a plane to come to a building. Anyone who lives on the top floor of this apartment complex must be shitting their pants on a daily basis.
The city and much of the imagery in Ghost in the Shell is based on Hong Kong. In 1995, when this movie came out, Hong Kong had an airport called Kai Tak, and it was ridiculously close to the apartment complexes in Kowloon. Yes, these are real images of planes on approach to Kai Tak Airport, and it's why these planes are so close in Ghost in the Shell.
This movie has 3 speeds: action-packed, contemplative, and depressed as f***.
Isn't that exactly what people like about The Dark Knight?
Seriously, dude? You saw this chick way back there and started honking instead of slamming on your brakes? Were you attempting a catcall?
Jeremy thinks it's easier for a semi-truck to stop its momentum than a human to get out of the way of said truck. In other words, Jeremy is that one chick in the BMW that cuts off trucks on the highway.
Reanimating a corpse sounds just like stepping into a tub of chocolate pudding.
And you know what that sounds like? Why?
それにお前は新米だから知らねえだろうがな。少佐の擬態もメガテクボディ射精なんだ。
Something we didn't think was relevant to mention when you were recently briefed on this case that's mostly about Megatech.
And pray tell, why would this be relevant before now? Do you think cops would mention their phones were made by Apple if they were arresting Steve Jobs? The bodies made by Megatech are classified. The only reason they're mentioning it now is because the body has a ghost in it, something that is relevant to the team and specifically why they told Togasa about it.
You know what? This is awesome. Super awesome. But I'm still wondering why, in this world, anyone like this even needs to type at all. Like, you can't just jack into the computer and upload a whole bunch of instructions?
No.
I'm glad futuristic cars could spell out that they're backing up. Previously, there was no way to know when a car was backing up without using your common sense.
That's cute, coming from the dude that didn't know when a movie was transitioning to a different scene.
間違いないわ。私のと同じ2902光学迷彩。あれを使ってるのはうちとレンジャー4か。
The Major is positive about this, but didn't bring it up when she clearly saw that punk from the earlier chase using the same technology.
That's precisely her point. She believes Section 6 has been supplying the enemy with the tech. If you would just listen to what they're saying without interrupting, you would have heard that.
近かどうした
Man, Ishikawa is name-checked a lot in this movie for a dude that has about 12 seconds of screen time.
Kinda like The Wizard of Oz.
先日の外相通訳のゴーストハックにしてもマレスを送還する口実を欲しがってたのは外務省でしょ
This is where the movie is in total f***ing confusion overdrive. Who is Maris? We saw the government guys talking about him earlier, and he's seeking asylum. But why was the foreign ministry so hell-bent on deporting him? Deporting him meant sending financial aid to a country they didn't want to send money to. Also remember, we have a computer programmer who was also seeking asylum at the beginning of the movie, just before that scene in the elevator.
Malice is the former military leader of Gavel, a new sovereignty in this universe. Malice was trying to meet with Japanese intelligence in secret under the guise of seeking political asylum in order to destabilize the new Gavel government. Section 9 uncovers this plot through their investigation of the Puppet Master.
This tank thing has rockets, but only uses them every once in a while.
It's almost like rockets are a finite resource you wouldn't want to waste without a clear shot.
So now is the perfect time to use my camouflage. That would have been great if I'd used it when it was shooting at me.
She doesn't go invisible because of the spider tank. There is still a human enemy she's fighting here.
Batu comes in as a literal deus ex machina to save the Major.
Okay, but this sin doesn't make any sense. If you're saying that Bato is a literal deus ex machina, you're wrong, because the literal deus ex machina would have been something like the biblical God Yahweh inhabiting his body. Second, if that's the route you want to take, this entire movie would be a figurative deus ex machina, or ghost in the machine, which is where the film gets its title. Lastly, this isn't a deus ex machina in the figurative literary sense either, because we are aware of Bato and the fact that he was on his way here to back up the Major. A true deus ex machina would have been the spider tank dying because its battery ran out.
私は自分を生命体だと言ったが現状ではそれはまだ不完全なものに過ぎない
The Puppet Master wants to be a real person so he can f***ing die.
Please give me a better definition of life other than having sex and eventually dying.
君と融合したい
Gotta tell you, I've heard some bad pickup lines, but this is up there, especially coming from a computer program that hacked into a woman that's torn in half, then occupied the brain of its chosen mate and propositioning the erstwhile half-woman. I mean, it's still not as bad as You Must Be from Tennessee.
What?